You were talking about the community. Do you see the distinction between the frisk and the actual search being observed?
You know what it is? I see it happening every single day. Like, I live in Hunts Point in the South Bronx, and kind of like just the other day, my friend Jay was telling me that he was coming back from going to help his mom, help her out of her house. He's coming back and he gets stopped. They made him take his shoes off. You know what I mean? They went through his pockets, and like nothing, I'm listening to him, and his whole energy's like, of course I live. He's like, I ain't got nothing on me. Mm-hmm. So like, just like the idea that this is something that's becoming, we've been desensitized to the point that it's okay for these abuses to go on. You know what I mean? And I think that's the main problem, is that we've lost kind of that sensitivity, and that some of these things are okay. Mm-hmm. For example, many people, like they say, like if you ask a police officer for his badge number, that's a one-way ticket to central booking. And a lot of times this is what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. We're seeing, people being charged. And that's the thing, is that not only do they abuse your rights, but if you stop and try to assert yourself in any way, for example, of what your rights are, mm-hmm. then you're most likely going to end up catching more charges. So what's the alternative? You let it happen, mm-hmm. and then you kind of just lose your dignity as it's happening, because I feel that for anybody to come up to another human being, take off your shoes and let me run through your pockets, criminalizing you by that way. But that's the reality. That's the conditions that our communities are living under. And I think that, especially our young people, when you talk about police at their schools, police, I mean, this is something that there's constant authority. There's a constant abuse of authority over young people in our communities. And I think that becomes problematic, because it starts affecting people's identities. It starts affecting, and really what it ends up being is a new form of colonization, in which we end up losing our identity, our sense of worth. You know what I mean? And this is the reality that we're facing. So.
And the answer to it isn't necessarily in the courts. Once people are charged with crimes, yes, lawyers can litigate motions to suppress and say that someone was stopped illegally, or bring a civil rights action, all of which is important. Believe me, I think that they're very important. But I think what you were saying on the community level, it's even more important. Because people in the community who live in your community see it happening. And more people have to organize and form local community councils that deal with the police and say, you can't just come into our community from wherever you live and treat our people like this. And this is wrong. And they would have to admit that it's wrong on a certain level. And that's where the power to change, I think, is really going to come from. When, the Malcolm X grassroots movements, Cop Watch and similar programs that have existed in the past are one step. You can go back 30, 40 years to the Black Panther Party's efforts to decentralize the police department, to have community councils in each precinct running the police department. Could you imagine something like that happening now? But that's on the level that I think you can see change.
Going back a little bit to when someone is stopped on the street, we talked about what reasonable suspicion was. Can you tell us what probable cause is?
The two terms, to a large extent, are interchangeable, but one is just less than the other. Probable cause is really reason to believe that a crime has been committed and that the person you're holding committed that crime. It's a very low standard of proof. If I falsely accuse you of assaulting me, and you're just home, but I make a complaint against you, that's probable cause to arrest, because they have reason to believe that a crime has been committed, that you committed the crime. Let's say I have a scratch from somewhere. You can be arrested. It's a very low standard of proof, but it justifies what's called a full-blown arrest. The law gives the police a lot more leeway to simply stop and question someone on much less of a basis.
And after you're arrested, could you tell us a little bit about what people can expect after a formal arrest?
Well, once again, it changes with each arrest. But let's assume that the police officer that arrests you follows the book, and you're not beaten up, or they don't plant drugs on you, or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
which we know happens. But just to give people an idea, generally someone is searched on the scene, and I'm not talking about a body cavity search, but a pretty good pat down to make sure, allegedly, that a person doesn't have weapons, drugs, other kind of evidence. The next step is you're taken to the precinct. And once again, it depends on the crime, but let's a typical drug offense or a robbery offense, something like that. Obviously for homicides and other things, the procedure is can be a lot different. The arresting officer will generally ask the now arrestee, well, what happened? And there's a tendency, if someone's committed a crime or if someone hasn't committed a crime, to think right away that we can talk ourselves out of it. That you can, oh man, no, that wasn't me, that was the person around there. I just came from the store. And you may be saying something that you think is relatively innocuous, but may be inculpatory or be bad for your legal case, even if it just, let's say, places you in a certain place near where a crime was committed. So the best thing to do when they ask you those questions, and always the best thing to do, is not to say anything. Now, we all know from TV and cop shows, if not from experience, that the police are supposed to read someone what's called your Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. If you can't afford a lawyer, one will be appointed at a particular time. But as soon as you ask for it, actually. Does that happen all the time? Of course not. A lot of cops do go by the book and do it. Too many don't. So don't expect that just because you talk to them before you read your rights that later on, or they question you, that you can, oh, they didn't read me my rights, then you can get the statement thrown out. Because guess what? By the time the police officer gets to court, when you're at your hearing, when you're trying to get rid of that statement, you think he's going to testify that he didn't read your rights? Yeah. Of course I did. And he'll have his card there, and he answered yes to this, yes to that. So don't depend on that. So the best thing to do is shut up and ask for a lawyer.
And I was going to say, what do you tell people to say in that situation where they feel the police are asking them questions? What's the proper response from someone?
I want a lawyer. If the arrestee is under the age of 16, also the parents have a right to be involved. If they're 16 or over, the parents should certainly be involved, but they can't invoke the same kind of rights. Under all circumstances, someone should ask for a lawyer, but if the arrestee is 15 and under, they're not even supposed to be charged with a crime unless it's something like murder or attempted murder, in which case the parents have more of a right to assert the individual's rights. So all of that happens within the first hour of arrest. Someone will then be taken to the precinct, processed. After many hours, will be taken in all the different boroughs to what's called central booking. Once you're taken to central booking, you're getting close to going in front of a judge. Because the central booking locations are generally near the courthouses in each of the 5 boroughs. And hopefully within 24 to 36 hours, often it's more, someone will appear in front of a judge and be formally charged with an offense, be it a felony or a misdemeanor, and will either be released in his or her own recognizance or bail will be set. And of course, before you appear in front of a judge, someone who looks, like me, or maybe not quite like me, is going to come see you in this crowded area with people screaming and say, I'm your lawyer. You've never seen this person, and you're supposed to, they interview you and they take information, but you definitely meet a lawyer before you get into court.
Well, I saw you actually not too long